Hello viewers and learners of the Postgraduate Diploma in Environmental and Occupational Health. Welcome to this course on Environmental Toxicology. I introduce myself as Dr. Susmitha bhaskar from the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University. This title which we will be dealing with today is Environmental Neurotoxicology. So we have learnt about the concepts in the toxicology, certain definitions which are related to this, and also certain systemic and organ toxins, and now we will see how the toxicants can have a specific effect on specific organs. So neurotoxicology refers to those effects of the toxins on the brain and the central nervous system. So the learning objectives of this module will include certain concepts and definitions related to neurotoxicology, the action and behavior of certain neurotoxic substances. We will see the environmental factors which are responsible for bringing about neurotoxicity, and finally we will also understand and discuss certain disorders, for example Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease, which may also be related to environmental factors and toxicants and the high prevalence of these diseases presently. Now let us first understand about the human nervous system. So the human nervous system, this coordinates behavior, it perceives and responds to the external stimuli, it mediates with the external environment, coordinates activities of all the organs, and it maintains the metabolic balance. The nervous system. Now this is a highly complex part of the human body, and it coordinates its actions and sensory information by transmitting signals to and from different parts of its body. So in this diagram you can see there is a flow chart, and we have explained that this nervous system, it could be classified into the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system. Again, the central nervous system can be further classified into the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, this could be classified into the autonomic and the somatic systems. The autonomic can be further classified into the parasympathetic and sympathetic, and the somatic can further be classified into the sensory and the motor. The peripheral nervous system, this consists of nerves. They are enclosed in bundles of long fibers or axons, and they connect the central nervous system to other parts of the body. So here you can see the diagram of the dendrite, the nucleus, you can see the cell body, you can see the axon, okay, how the myelin sheath is covering the axon. Then you can see the node of Ranvier where there are certain junctions. You can also see the synaptic junctions and the direction of the nerve impulse, how this is going. Now there are these motor and efferent nerves which are transmitting signals from the brain, and the sensory and the efferent, this will transmit the information from the body to the central nervous system. There are also mixed nerves, for example the spinal nerves. They will serve both these functions which have been described above. We have the enteric nervous system, and this functions to control the gastrointestinal system. Both the autonomic and the enteric nervous system, they function involuntarily. The human brain. Now this is the central organ of the human nervous system, and with the spinal cord they make up the central nervous system. Now the brain, this consists of the cerebrum, the brain stem, and the cerebellum. So these are all involved in like your learning activities, your creative skills, that all, and also your speaking, the intellect, and all this is contained in the cerebrum. Now the cerebellum is controlling your involuntary activities and so on. All this is contained, the entire the brain systems, they are contained in, and they are protected by the skull bones. Neuroanatomy is a term which is referred to the study of the anatomy of the brain. Neuroscience is the study of its function. Now this is the structure of the human brain. Here you can actually see the systems clearly. So we have the frontal lobe, and this is involved in the decision making, problem solving, consciousness, and also emotional behavior. Then we have the basal ganglia, which is important in movement. We have the temporal lobe, which is important in learning, in memory, in hearing, and also in interpreting language. The hypothalamus, this is very much important in controlling thirst, in telling us the hunger, in sleep, the mood, and also whenever we have the fever and so on. It is a hypothalamus regulation which is very important, which is balance, bringing about the balance in the human body. Then there is the parietal lobe. This is involved in sensation, in perception, in spatial reasoning. Then we have the occipital lobe, that is very important in vision and in seeing things. We have the thalamus. This is important in sensory relay and in so other functions. Cerebellum, this is important in coordination, in your movement, when you walk, the posture, the balance, all this is supported by the cerebellum and its activities. Brain stem, or the pons cerebelli. This is important in breathing, in swallowing, important in regulating your heart beat, your heart rate, your blood pressure, and so on. So, you have seen each and every aspect of that small human brain, which is as big as compared to your fist. Everybody's size would be different, and that is controlling the entire body and the different functions, which is important. So, that is why brain death and heart death, these are two concepts which the medical doctors always believe and which is to be taken. In some countries, brain death is also considered as the death of a person, whereas in some countries we often take the heart has to stop, the death of the heart is declared when the patient can be declared dead and no more living. So, the brain, this is protected by the skull and it is suspended in the cerebrospinal fluid, and it is isolated from the blood stream by the blood-brain barrier. This blood-brain barrier, it is protecting us against the circulating toxins or pathogens, and that can cause several brain infections. At the same time, it will also allow the vital nutrients which can reach the brain. However, this is still susceptible to disease, infection, stroke and trauma. Degenerative disorders, which I explained in the first part of my lecture. We have the Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease and multiple sclerosis. Let us take a look at these disorders. The Parkinson's disease. Here you see he is an old man, maybe in his 60s or 70s, and you can see he has a stooping posture, and you will see that the trunk is actually tilted forward, and there is the facial expression, also there is a different kind of a facial expression. Then the postural balance is also not very normal. Rigidity occurs in the bones. Then there is also rigidity in the hips or on the knees, and there is trembling of the extremities. This is very important in the Parkinson's disease. You will see that their hands tremble, or even their extremities, their leg and the feet also tremble. Then there is also the way they walk, that can also be certainly different from the very normal person. So, this is very common in the elderly people, and it can result in bradykinesia, resting tremor and also rigidity. But this is also being observed in the younger generation. Younger, when I mean to say even after 45 and 50s, people are developing this disease. So, this is characterized histopathologically by the degeneration of the dope aminogenic neurons in the substantia nigra pars compacta, leading to the progressive loss of the neurotransmitter dopamine and cardinal motor deficits. So, this is associated with the abnormal accumulation of misfolded proteins, primarily alpha synuclein in the cytoplasmic inclusions called the Lewy bodies and neurites. The pathogenesis is still not well understood. So, now here in this figure you can see a non-Parkinson's and a Parkinson's brain. So, here you can see the substantia nigra, okay. That difference you can see in both parts, and you can actually see it even in the bigger part of the brain, and also there are certain cytoplasmic inclusions called as the Lewy bodies and the neurites, and still research is being conducted to understand the neuropathological lesions which are involving this disease. So, similar neuropathological lesions which are involving the deposition of these abnormal proteins characterize other neurological disorders such as in the Alzheimer's, the Lewy body dementia, Huntington's disease, the multiple system atrophy and also some prion diseases. Now coming on to the term neurotoxicity. This is the capacity of any chemical, biological or physical agent to cause adverse functional and structural change in the nervous system. Environmental neurotoxicity refers to the adverse neural responses to exposures to all the external extragenetic factors, for example occupational exposures, lifestyles, in the pharmaceuticals, food and also even radiation. Neurotoxins. So these toxins can alter the activity of the nervous system in ways that can disrupt or kill the nerves. Due to their high metabolic rate, neurons are at the greatest risk of damage that are caused by the neurotoxins. Depending on a neurotoxin's chemical profile, it will cause damage to certain parts or particular cellular elements of the nervous system. Non-polar substances. Now these are more soluble in lipids and therefore they can enter the nervous tissue more easily than the polar compounds which are less soluble in the lipids. So this can cause the nigrostriaceal cell death by interfering with the mitochondrial function, inducing the oxidative stress, protein aggregation and it can also modify the proteasomal function. For example, exposure to the heavy metals like lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic and manganese. All this can increase the risk of degenerative diseases through the neurotoxic accumulation of metals in the substantia nigra pars compacta and by increasing the oxidative stress induced apoptosis. Alzheimer's disease. This is also referred to as an old man's disease and it is a type of dementia and it is also a cause of dementia. So in dementia, this is basically a general term which is given to a decline in memory, in reasoning or in other thinking skills. And Alzheimer's disease, this is responsible for 60 to 80% of the dementia cases. So you have seen in the elderly people, they forget where they have kept their glasses or where they have kept their, their medicines and sometimes we feel that they are doing it purposefully. But it is due to the onset of certain dementia, these diseases, neurodegenerative diseases and in the long term they can also forget your names or even the names or even their closed ones. They forget to recognize the very close ones, but sometimes some people they will easily recognize, for example their grandchildren or their own sisters or their very own blood relations, them they may recognize. So all this is the understanding the brain system and these neurological effect. Researchers are continuously researching on this and it is a very interesting topic for research and continuously people are experimenting on various substances which are causing such diseases. But still generally Alzheimer's disease sets in at an age older than 65 where people have had a family history of this disease, inheriting genes from our parents, existing mild cognitive impairment, Down syndrome which is a chromosomal aberration that can also cause the disease, previous head trauma or any injury to the head that can also cause the disease, and also when people are shut off from a community. Sometimes people are due to their peer pressure, even these are some hazards of working in an office when there is multitasking and when you are not able to cope up with the pressure and with your colleagues, then you go in isolation for extended periods of time. And that way you get more and more reclusive, not connected with people, and then you can also develop such kind of mental diseases. Now there can also be other psychiatric conditions, for example schizophrenia. So schizophrenia is also a type of a mental disorder. Here again people could be elated, they could have certain clinical depression syndromes. They are thought to be associated with certain brain dysfunctions. This figure you can see the symptoms of schizophrenia, where in the positive they could have delusions, they could also have hallucinations, they can also have certain kind of psychological and suicidal effects, they can also have the speech defects, and here again they can also have suicidal tendencies for themselves and also for others. They can even harm and injure other people in their locality or in their own family. So this is a serious mental disorder in which people interpret reality abnormality. So for them, they will consider that some person is standing in front of them or even behind them and they have come to harm them, or they are talking to them, but actually it is a kind of a delusion, it is hallucination. There may not be any such person who is there. So these are disorders of the brain. So hallucinations, delusions, disordered thinking and behavior which impairs our daily functioning. This can be really disabling. Viruses, certain extensive exposure to marijuana or highly stressful situations, these can trigger schizophrenia in the people who have inherited a tendency to develop the disorder. Then damage to the nervous system. So there can be massive injury to the nervous system which can result in coma, in convulsions, in paralysis, dementia and also in coordination. So there could be slight damage which can impair the reasoning ability. They can cause loss of memory, disturb communication, interfere with the motor function and also impair the health indirectly by reducing functions such as even attention and alertness. So therefore the body's response to neurotoxins is influenced by factors such as neurotransmitter that is affected, the cellular membrane integrity, the presence of detoxifying mechanisms. Some examples of substances that can be neurotoxic to humans. They can include certain plant seeds, chemotherapy drugs, radiations, the drugs of abuse, heavy metals, certain food additives, insecticides and pesticides, cosmetics and also industrial cleaning solvents. So cosmetics, even in this there are certain chemical components which are added. An example which I would like to give is lipsticks. Now in majority of the lipsticks, and that too in those that are very brightly colored, for example red or maroon, they had once upon a time a very high concentration of lead. So lead is a neurotoxicant and it can interfere with the blood-brain barrier and it can enter the blood-brain barrier causing neurotoxic effects. Lead is also, it can enter the placental barrier and it can also interfere with the development of the growing fetus. So it can cause even mental retardation to the fetus. So therefore it also has teratogenic effect. So the cosmetics, the European agency, they have examined several of the lipsticks and they contained 60 to 70% of lead content in them. So after that now there are several other compounds and the colorants that are being used and organic compounds also. But there are also solutions to these. We can also use natural lip gloss or the gels which contain organic compounds such as the extracts of beetroot or the extract of plant products. And even to dye the hair, there are the henna and other natural hair coloring and hair washing substances which do not contain such harmful chemicals which can cause neurotoxicity. The effects of neurotoxicity. So some of the effects may appear immediately while others can even take months or years to manifest. So it depends on various factors such as characteristics of the neurotoxin, dose and exposure, ability to metabolize and excrete the toxin. So some symptoms of neurotoxicity. This include paralysis or weakness in the limbs, tingling and numbness in the limbs, headache, vision loss, loss of memory and cognitive function, behavioral problems, depression, loss of circulation and imbalance. Neurolathyrism. This is a paralytic disease which is caused by the extensive use of seeds of Lathyrus sativus, that is called kesari dal. This is also referred to as a poor man's dal. So it was used in Madhya Pradesh in several of the districts there, and people complained of paralysis and spastic paraplegia. So this is a neurotoxic, that is this special kesari dal, and a neurotoxin called as beta-N oxalyl amino L-alanine BOAA. So this was present in the seeds and it is found to be responsible for this effect. And let me tell you, these seeds look very familiar to the arhar or the tuar dal. So that is why we have to be very careful in selecting and in our food choice when we select the dals. The polychlorinated biphenyls. So this is an organic chemical. They are polychlorinated hydrocarbons. They are persistent organic pollutants. That means they remain in the environment for a long period of time. Then they are non-biodegradable and they can also be bioaccumulated in the plants for several years. This is used in the industrial and commercial applications, electrical, plasticizers. It is used in paints, in plastics, in pigments and also in the dyes. Now this polychlorinated biphenyls, they can cause cancer, adverse health effects on the immune, reproductive, nervous and the endocrine systems. Mercury. Now we have understood about the Minamata disease which occurred in Japan. I made a mention of this. Now the India's Minamata is also there, and can you guess where India's Minamata exists? That would be in Singrauli, which is a powerhouse of India and that has massive coal reserves and many thermal power plants. So mercury is one of the natural and perhaps the most harmful components of coal, and large quantities of coal, they are burnt in the thermal power plants and considerable amount of mercury is released into the atmosphere. The Center for Science and Environment, they took a study around Singrauli and they see that the people complained of unexplained ailments, and they report that mercury, which is a deadly toxin in the coal, is slowly entering people's homes, food, water and even their blood. Lead. This is a potent neurotoxin whose toxicity has been recognized for thousands of years. So the developing brain is particularly susceptible. Pregnant women, young children are particularly vulnerable as the lead easily crosses the placenta and enters the fetal brain and interferes with normal development. The sources of lead contamination, that is more than 3/4 of the global lead consumption is in the manufacture of lead acid batteries for motor vehicles. But lead is also used in gasoline, in pigments, in paints, in soldiers, in the stained glass, in lead crystal glassware, ammunition, jewelry, in toys and cosmetics and also traditional medicines. So that is why we should be very careful. Now it is banned of course, but previously there was a report when children were actually, when their teething occurs, they start biting the toys, and some of the toys they had the lead content, and those children reported to have a slow growth and they also had the mental retardation and certain other problems because of chewing these lead toys every day on continuously several hours and on a daily day-to-day basis. So but now of course lead is being banned, it is phased out in several countries and this is no longer used in toys and certain other manufacturing equipments. But again, lead is also an anti-knocking additive, and this was used previously for several years as an anti-knocking additive in the gasoline, and this actually anti-knocking means that it will reduce the tendency of a fuel to auto-ignite. So this is tetraethyl lead, but this damages the environment and also human health. So leaded petrol. This was in use for several years, and leaded petrol poisoning has been one of the world's most serious environmental health problem, and that was responsible for 90% of more of the human lead exposure. But now fortunately, after several of the movements and the policies and also the protocols that have come in place in Austria, in Canada, in Denmark, Germany, Japan, Slovakia, Sweden and also United States, lead is no longer a gasoline additive. Now there are also neurotoxins and dangerous vessels. So some vessels which contain lead, when people make their food in that can give a very good taste, especially the tamarind pulp and tamarind substances which are made as soup, that can give a very good taste, but then the toxin is slowly entering the human system. Endosulfan in the cashew nut. So this was an organic chlorine compound, and this was sprayed extensively in Kasaragod district in Kerala and on the cashew plantations. So here we find that this was an organochlorine compound which is persistent in the environment, and even the breakdown products are persistent and they bioaccumulate in the humans. So there extensively this endosulfan was sprayed over the cashew plantations using a helicopter, and finally the children who were born there in Kerala, they had cerebral palsy congenital abnormalities. You can see the state from this figure how toxic this chemical is and how this can cause mental aberrations and neurotoxicity in the and the teratogenic effects, that is the birth defects, especially in the brain, and the mental disorders in the children that were born during that time. Drugs, for example, the anti-neoplastic drugs and tricyclic antidepressants, they have neurotoxic effects. Antidepressants, they have a therapeutic activity at a low dose, but then when they are taken at a higher dose, then they can show a life-threatening anticholinergic effects at the higher doses. In the same way, the anti-neoplastic drugs like cisplatinum, it is a valuable chemotherapeutic agent, but it can cause toxic neuropathies. Antipsychotic drugs and antibacterial agents, they can also produce disabling movements and disorders, and they can also cause the trigger of loss of hearing and balance. Drugs of abuse. So this is like methamphetamine and amphetamine. The alterations of the dopaminergic system, they may persist even after years of your not getting exposed from the drugs, but they may be associated with certain deficits in the motor and the cognitive performance. And these normally people will tend to either ingest, eat, or even dope it on their tongues, and even they can also inject it into their systems. So current research, scientists are looking at whether occupational and environmental toxins may play a role in the neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease and multiple sclerosis. Whether or not the interaction between environmental factors and genes contribute to brain disorders is another research question that is currently being investigated. So therefore, dear learners, prevention is the key to dealing with neurological diseases of toxic environmental origin. This can be prevented by eliminating or reducing the exposures at the source, that is the primary prevention, or they can also be controlled by early detection and diagnosis of the neurotoxic effects. Dear learners, in this module, we have understood about the concepts relating to neurotoxicology, the neurotoxins, and the several environmental factors and the heavy metals which are also responsible for creating neurotoxicity with certain case studies. For example, we discussed that of endosulfan and that of lead, and also mercury, which is in Singrauli, where the thermal power plants are releasing the large amount of the mercury into the environment. Therefore, we have seen how the environmental factors and also certain drugs of therapeutic and even the chemotherapeutic agents, they can also lead to the neurotoxic effects. I hope you have understood the concepts relating to this part of the lecture. Thank you for your patient listening.